Hello again and welcome to another bearing removal and installation video featuring Boca bearings. Now today's engine is a rather simple two-stroke engine, but it's an iconic OS engine from, I think these engines came out in the mid-90s. It's the FX series of engines, and they had an entire series of these. They range from the 40, I think they had a 25 FX, 40, 46, 91. And so they were a very successful series of engines, and I flew many 46 FX engines in the mid-90s. Now, the engine today is actually the younger or the smaller brother to the 46. It's the 40 FX. Somewhat of an overlooked engine because everybody seemed to just really go more towards the more power. But the 40 FX is a really nice engine. Features all the same quality as any OS engine, and it was very powerful for its displacement. So let's go straight to the table and let's do this bearing removal and installation. Okay, so here on the table I've got everything I need to do the removal of the bearings of this engine. I've got the 90% empty crankcase that just still has the crankshaft and bearings installed. Now this is an engine that was given to me by a good friend. It seems to be a fairly low time engine, but it's got a little bit of battle damage here on the fins, but that should not be a problem. I've also got my hardwood block that I'll use to tap that crankshaft out along with the hammer. I've got a flat nose punch that I'll use to get the front bearing out. Hopefully maybe not the rear bearing, but we'll see. My desk vise, heat gun, and my heat resistant glove. And with all that said, let's start heating this engine up so that we can get these bearings out. Alright, let's see if that's enough to get this crankshaft out here. Okay, so the crankshaft's coming out quite easily. Now, did the bearing come out with it? It did not. And it looks like that bearing is flush in there too, so we're going to have to use alternate means to get that bearing out. But in the meantime, let's get this front bearing out. So that front bearing is out. Now when I say alternate means, I mean that I don't think that I can get a lip or an edge on this. It just doesn't feel like I can do that here, but I'm going to give it a shot. Let's see if I can move that rear bearing, because what happens sometimes is the bearing, the ID of the bearing is exactly the same size as the ID here, and you have to use a different type of tool, but I actually think I was able to drop this down. I think I got enough of an edge. I did. I got enough of an edge on that one that the bearing came out. So that's very nice. That makes things a lot easier. So, as I was saying, this is a fairly lightly used engine. It doesn't look too bad in there. I'm probably just going to do a little bit of a hand cleaning instead of putting this in the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm just not sure it really is that dirty. But as you can see, the bearings that came out of this is interesting because they're completely sealed on both sides. This is a fully shielded bearing. I am not entirely certain if these are the original OEM bearings, because I don't recall OS ever putting fully shielded bearings in the rear like this, nor do I recall ever seeing fully sealed, rubber sealed bearings like this in one of their two-stroke engines. I could be wrong, but I just don't ever recall seeing that. So I'm not sure if I'm going to, when I install the new bearings in there, if I'm going to follow those guidelines at all. I think I'm probably going to do what I typically do with my bearings. So let me go ahead and get these items cleaned up and ready for the installation, and then we will do that. Okay, I've got the crankcase cleaned up, I've got the crankshaft cleaned up, I've got my table reset for installation of the bearings, and the kit number for this particular set of bearings for the OS 40 and 46 FX is ENK-001. So let me open up this set of bearings and I'll show you how this particular set matches up with what came out of this engine. And I'm still not entirely sure that these bearings are the original ones. This engine might have had bearings replaced before, because I've never seen you know, a double shielded rear bearing on an OS engine that I can recall, nor a double rubber sealed bearing. So what came in this kit was ZZ bearing, which is a metal shielded bearing on both sides, and for both the front and the rear. So what I'm going to do here is, you know, this engine isn't going anywhere. It's going to stay in my inventory. So just for the heck of it, I think I'm just going to leave things as they are. I mean, sure, this isn't a rubber sealed bearing like came out of there, but the bearing doesn't feel all that bad. It looks like it's had some heat on there, but I'm just going to leave these bearings as they are. So the next step for me is to lubricate these parts up instead of removing any shields. And when I do a reassembly of an engine, or especially bearings, I always like to use the Lightning Lube's Road Power from Boca bearing. This is just a really great assembly lube, and I really like using it. And I always put just a little bit in this jar, and to me it looks like I've got about 1 pump's worth in that jar right now. So I'm just gonna leave that as it is, and we'll just use what's in here. So I'm just going to use my finger to apply this Lightning Lube Road Power to all the mating surfaces I can touch, especially the ones that the bearings are going to be riding in, obviously. But as long as I'm in here, the next step for this engine will be to get it reassembled. I might as well just go ahead and coat the entire inside of the crankcase, and I'll always do the rear bearing outside and the inner race just for the heck of it, since I can actually fit my finger in there, and of course the front bearing. So when I install bearings in just about every engine, 99% of them, I always will put the front bearing in first, and then I will put the rear bearing on the crankshaft. This should just slide right over it just like that. And the reason I'll do it in that order is because with the front bearing in there, it acts as a centering mechanism, so that when you're installing this critical rear bearing, it goes in there nice and straight. So we're all ready to go here. Let me wipe my fingers one more time, put my glove on, heat this case up, and we'll get these bearings installed, with the exception of the fact that I forgot to grab that. That is my beat up socket extension that I use to drive the main bearing and crankshaft into place. That should be adequate heating. Let's turn it this way. Put this front bearing in here, just like that. That bearing is installed. Now let's just see how this rear bearing wants to drop in there. That last little smack, you can hear it going home, setting home. And there you have it. Nice new fresh set of bearings for this really nice OS 40 FX engine.